23 years. That's how long one of England's oldest and most prestigious football clubs, Nottingham Forest, spent away from the top flight. Now, after a fantastic season and a narrow 1-0 victory against Huddersfield Town, they're officially back. Today, we're talking about an extraordinary story. The story of how a band of outcasts dragged a fallen football giant to Premier League redemption. Let's start at the beginning. In 1980, Nottingham Forest were running the world of football. They had won the European Cup 2 times in a row, and the entire city collectively toasted one man's name: legendary manager Brian Clough. Brian was a hero. After all, he had brought the working-class city of Nottingham unprecedented joy. The club was a Division I powerhouse throughout the 70s and 80s, and guess what? They were actually one of the founding members of the Premier League. When it was formed in 1992, Brian was still in charge. The Tricky Trees had finished in the top 10 3 consecutive times, and as a new era of English football dawned, things were looking good for the club. And then they had a devastating season. Even though the squad contained the likes of Roy Keane, Stuart Pearce, and Scott Gemmell, they finished at the very bottom of the table. Out of the 42 games they played, they lost 22 times. The legend Brian was known to be upbeat and chirpy at all times, but after the club's relegation, he looked dejected as he confessed that they just weren't good enough. He then retired from management forever. Now for one of Premier League's first yo-yo clubs. After they were relegated, the one and only Stan Collymore scored 50 goals over the course of the next 2 seasons as they were promoted from the second tier. Then they remarkably finished third under Frank Clark in 1994 and 1995. The following year they finished 9th, and the year after that they finished 20th yet again. In 1997/98, they won the second tier and got promoted. They were, without a doubt, one of the Premier League's very first yo-yo clubs. Then the club had yet another disastrous season in 1998/99. They won just 7 games and finished at the bottom of the barrel. This was only the 10th time since the league was established in 1888 that Nottingham had failed to reach double figures. And boy, were they punished accordingly. They were considered to be the favorites for an immediate return to the Premier League, but things didn't really pan out that way. As fate would have it, they wouldn't make a return to English football's top flight for 23 whole years. Up next, Chris Hughton out, Steve Cooper in. Fast forward to 2021. Forest were once again at the bottom of the championship. It had been over 20 years since fans had seen their beloved club play in the Premier League, and the city of Nottingham was dejected. They had only managed to get 1 point from their first 6 games, and relegation seemed pretty much inevitable. To the relief of fans, Chris Hughton was sacked. Nottingham Forest recruitment team began to pursue Steve Cooper, a man who had been unemployed ever since he had left Swansea. His managerial career had been pretty modest so far, and while a lot of people anticipated some improvement, no one was expecting miracles. Cooper accepted the job offer, and many believed he was way over his head. Managing a club of Nottingham's historic stature is no easy task, and many before him have failed to deal with the pressure that comes with it. There were murmurs of another failure and a possible relegation to the 3rd division. Cooper set up a home in the city and was eager to make an impression. He would often stop and chat with fans as he went along with his day. While a lot of fans took a liking to his personality, they didn't really think he could get the results. And then everything changed. Steve Cooper and his ragged band of outcasts. Forest managed to grind out a win against Barnsley at home, and just like that, they were on the board. And then they beat Birmingham, Blackpool, and Bristol in consecutive games. The mood around the city began to shift. The narrative about the manager began to change. Fans began to dream again. In his first 14 games, they lost just 1. And by December, Forest was in the top half of the table. Cooper brought in 3 players, all of whom were rejected by their previous clubs. These outcasts were Steve Cook from Bournemouth, Kieran Davis from Aston Villa, and Sam Surridge from Stoke City. As we would soon find out, all 3 were perfect choices for the club. Steve Cook, in particular, was a great addition to the squad. The 31-year-old brought experience, organization, and leadership to the young backline. Since his inclusion, season, the team only conceded 10 goals in 20 games. Like many players on the team, Cook complimented his boss. He said that Cooper is intense, but very good, and said that the manager has a great nature. He revealed that he's very friendly, and players are in and out of his office all the time. The team kept piling up the victories. The manager became more assured, fans became more hopeful, and player belief was higher than ever. Defender Max Lowe claimed that the team does not fear anyone. He said that there's not a single player he's come across where he feels like he needs to be on the back foot. 21-year-old winger Brennan Johnson was described as too young for championship football by former manager Chris Hughton, but under the leadership of Cooper, he began to thrive and was actually named in the championship team of the season. In the 38 games since the manager's appointment, no team had taken more points than Nottingham Forest. Something special was happening. The tide was finally turning. Next, Nottingham on the brink of promotion. The city of Nottingham was alive again. Fans were overjoyed and excited. For the first time in over 2 decades, football was bringing the city together. The club's super passionate fans, known as Forza Garibaldi, began to unveil huge, colorful tifos, and ticket sales surged to the point where the club had no choice but to make plans to expand the stadium. Lifelong fans of the club expressed that this kind of activity was actually unprecedented. The city hadn't seen anything like this in far too long. Seeing the club in the top flight once again would be a dream come true for all fans, and they could not wait. On the final day of the season, Nottingham was third, and they were facing Bournemouth in an extremely crucial game. All they needed was one more win, and they'd seal automatic promotion to the Premier League. Thousands of fans were glued to their screens to see their club triumph. Millions of pounds were at stake. But football is a cruel, cruel sport. In a devastating game, Nottingham lost 1-0. Bournemouth was back in the Premier League, but Forest would have to win the playoffs to get promoted. Despite this heartbreaking result, Cooper quickly reminded everyone that the dream was still alive. He praised his team for giving automatic promotion a good go, and pointed out that by doing that, they'd managed to get in the playoffs. He said the playoffs are brilliant and unique, and he wants his team to get excited about them. Once again, Nottingham Forest were underdogs. Statisticians were doubting their ability to win the playoffs because of their poor record against the top 6. The odds were truly against them, but as Brian Clough once famously said, "I hope anybody's not stupid enough to write us off." And finally, Nottingham Forest pulls off a miracle. In their first 2-legged playoff against Sheffield United, Nottingham Forest did things the hard way. Despite leading 2-1 from the first game and then extending that lead in the 19th minute of the second, they allowed Sheffield back in the game. Goals from Morgan Gibbs-White and John Fleck took the game to extra time and eventually to the penalties. Then their goalkeeper Bryce Samba pulled off an incredible performance as he saved 3 penalties in the shootout. The Tricky Trees won the shootout 3-2, and just like that, they were going to Wembley. After the game, Cooper was visibly pleased, and he praised the fantastic crowd for supporting them. He once again told his players to keep going and keep believing. Now, just one team stood between Nottingham and a long-awaited return to the Premier League, Huddersfield. The first half was mostly unremarkable, but in the 43rd minute, James Garner delivered a fantastic ball to the penalty area. Ryan Yates tried to attack, but it was the unfortunate Levi Colwill's connection that sent the ball into the back of the net. Huddersfield couldn't make a comeback, and Nottingham ended up winning the game 1-0. After all that waiting, it was one final stroke of luck that made sure the club would finally break free of the championship's clutches. So after 23 long years of misery and heartbreak, Nottingham Forest will once again compete in the Premier League. That's a wrap for this video. What are your thoughts on Nottingham Forest's fantastic season? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.